joining us as soon as he is able. Going to take a minute here just to walk through the agenda, and then we do have a couple of consent agenda items with minutes from our last couple of meetings. So the plan for this afternoon is Gianna is going to walk us through a summary of the public comment that was received on the draft budget that was published. We will take additional public comment from anyone who's interested in offering additional thoughts and feedback. But the ultimate goal of today is to adopt an SFY 27 budget that can be taken forward to the governor for his consideration as he completes his budget build. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about kind of plans for future meetings and timing of those meetings, as well as the steps we're going to be taking to review how the budget is proceeding through the legislative process. Are there any questions or amendments folks would like to suggest before we jump into looking at the consent agenda? Oh, good deal. And Doug is here.
Thanks, Julie.
All right. So hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes for October 9th and November 7th?
So moved.
Thanks, Tate. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chad. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Anyone abstaining? All right, excellent. Well, with that, Gianna and I assume Colleen, oh, I can see Colleen in the lower left there on the screen. Gianna and Colleen, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through what we heard in terms of public comment. And then I will turn it over to Doug.
Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome.
Gianna, but before we do that, do we want to do the accessibility slide?
Sure, that would be great for public comment time. Sarah, would you mind sharing that?
Sure. Can you see
So thank
that,
you, everyone. We do. Thank you. Thanks all for joining. And this is just a quick reminder for anyone to provide some support for those who are new to Teams, that all of our meetings are recorded and we share them on our Clean Water Initiative YouTube channel. I think that the link is clickable for those online. We also can make transcripts available on request, so please email the address there if needed. You can see the three dots, those called ellipses, on the top of your screen. Thank you. If you do want to see captions, you can find them there. Scroll down to language and speech and then show live captions. And then for the public comment section, there's some options to type in what is the chat bubble or raise your hand, at which point you can come off of mute. If you are calling in to please do that. You'd have to do *6. Yep. It's just *6. Oh, just *6. Okay, just *6, and we can have you come off mute now. So please let us know if there's any questions or if you have any accessibility challenges, and you can use our RSVP form when you're signing up to join these meetings to indicate any other needs that we can help you on in future meetings. Thank you. And we can switch over, Sarah, to the responsiveness summary, and I will let Colleen kick us off with an overview of the public comment period and how we approach that this year.
Great, thank you, Gianna. So the responsiveness summary is a compilation of all the public feedback that we received on the budget during the public comment period from members of the public. So all this can be found in the supporting materials. Sarah, can you see what page it is? It might be page 1.
9. Page 9 of
Thank you. So As far as the public comment period, that ran for a month between October 16th and November 16th. The public was able to give us feedback on the budget in 3 ways, which was through email, through a questionnaire, and by voicing a comment at the public hearing. A&R, with the help of our partners, sent outreach through social media, email newsletters, and a press release, which was picked up by WCAX. This year, our team also focused on obtaining feedback from our interagency group and worked with agency communication staff to encourage more public outreach. We also went to new venues to encourage more members of the public to participate in this year's public comment process. Sarah, could you scroll down to the graph on the next page? Great, thank you. This graph shows the annual public comment participation in the public comment period. So this blue line is the total draft budget amount per year, and the bars represent the count of individuals who have participated in the public comment process in one of those 3 ways that I mentioned earlier. You will see that there is a dip from SFY 26 to SFY 27, despite some efforts to expand our outreach. So we're going to take that information into account going forward and continue to improve our communications in years to come. This year, we also asked participants why they chose to comment on the budget in general. And these are some of the big themes that came out of those comments. The first one is equity considerations, like the equal distribution of clean water funds across Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog basins. Agricultural concerns, like the amount of need in the agricultural sector in general and the importance of sending money directly to farms. And 3-acre program and stormwater concerns, like residents' inability to pay for new regulatory stormwater infrastructure. And I will pass it over to Gianna to go more in depth on the responsiveness summary.
Thank you, Colleen. So as Colleen mentioned, it is unfortunate, despite some efforts, we continue to have some limited engagement from the public. And so these categories sort of respond our best effort of reflecting for the board what we heard, despite those small numbers. And also, despite those small numbers, we really want to express gratitude to those who did take the time to do the survey, to come to the public hearing. That's still really valuable input. And we hope that we've reflected it accurately for the board's consideration here. So the summary really provides DEC's recommended actions, but of course we defer to the board about where you all would like to take action on any other budgetary changes that are requested. So with that, I'm just going to go through each category and give you a brief summary and the DEC's response to that. The first is the total Clean Water Fund, the revenue and the total clean water budget size. Same as last year, there was a question on the online questionnaire that asked the public if they believed there was sufficient revenue coming into the fund. This is one of the charges of the board to consider whether there's sufficient revenue to support the clean water needs. And similar to last year, the majority of folks said they don't believe that there's sufficient revenue to support the needs of clean water across the state. We also provide 3 examples of written responses, sort of explaining some of the reasoning that we saw. One individual mentioned 3-acre and municipal projects being very expensive. Another individual spoke to the fact that we're we've done a lot of project identification and development, and now we're going into construction, which is more expensive and therefore needs more funding. And another individual spoke to sort of rising costs and the need for us to continue to support this in the long term. In terms of DEC's response to this, we definitely acknowledge and recognize there's a continued need for funding. This is a clear priority for the state and for us to support clean water. There was, however, a really huge stride and success with Act 37 that was passed this year. The Clean Water Fund was really facing a potential reduction of 30% of its revenue should we have lost the property transfer tax clean water surcharge. The Act 37 repealed the sunset, which really kind of set the longevity and fund sufficiency for the Clean Water Fund. It was a great success story for this year. Additionally, DEC looks towards the state's commitments to funding clean water and the Clean Water Initiative. So in statute, the state's really supporting $50 to $60 million a year, adjusted for inflation, recognizing costs can inflate over time, and recognizing that that's the state share and that it won't fully cover all the costs for these clean water projects. That $50 to $60 million target is the clean water budget plus federal funding to support clean water. And when you take those two things together, we're meeting or exceeding that target and have for several years. So with all of that combined, DEC doesn't recommend any changes to revenue raising this year. Category 2 has to do with the distribution of the funding across the different priority tiers. There's several questions in the questionnaire asking folks how they feel about how much money is distributed to each tier. And in general, most respondents seem to agree with the amount of money going to tier 1, the top priority, and there was the least amount of support for the amount of money going to tier 3, which is zeroed out in the budget. With one person asking why other priority items receive funding when tier 3 does not. In terms of a response from DEC, the distribution of funding across the tiers is sort of both a reflection, what falls into each tier is a reflection of statute coming out of 10 VSA 1389E that the board follows. And then how the board interprets that and distributes the funds with that sort of 60-30-10 target is articulated in the policy document. So the board's made the 60-30-10 as a target or goal, and that 10% includes both tier 3 and other priorities, not tier 3 above other priorities. And understanding that the tier 3 allocation is zeroed out, there's likely that's tied to some other commentary received asking for support for 3 acre. And so really wanting to point folks to the new line 2.5, which is elevating the need to a higher priority tier and trying to consistently fund both municipal and private sites through some initiatives there, which represents a substantial investment there. So no budget change is proposed based on some of that feedback. Category 3 reflects a series of asks to increase line items. And in general, this is certainly really difficult to achieve, particularly this year. There was the draft budget had no wiggle room or cushion to really allocate and meet additional needs. And so these requests would have to come from other line items in the budget. And with that in mind, here's sort of a line-by-line summary of some of those requests for the board. There was a request to increase line 1.2, which it supports tactical basin planning and Basin Water Quality Council participation to increase it in $25,000 and move it from $775,000 to $800,000. And DEC's response is that the current draft already reflects a $25,000 increase over last year. And this is based on consultation with the staff that oversee the work plans with those partners. And recognizing there may still be outstanding need there, our recommendation is to wait and see the impact of the existing budget increase that's proposed, given the other budgetary pressures. So no budget changes proposed in response to this ask. There was one ask to increase line 1.32 to land conservation and water quality projects, but with sort of insufficient participation or any other comments there, we don't recommend a budget change at this time. There were a couple requests to increase line 1.4, the water quality grants to farmers and partners, specifically to have the line item mimic last year's funding at 13 million. This year's funding is just above 12 million, so that would be an increase in about $957,000. And DEC's response to this is that this, just other than last year, this is a high watermark for this line item over the 10 years of the clean water budget. It also reflects a small increase in the base funding compared to last year. And so given that sort of precipitous rise in the funding for the line and the competing needs, it is currently sized in line with some predictable growth. So no budget change is proposed for this line item. There was one request to increase line 2.4, innovative or alternative technologies or practices. Last year that had a good amount of money in it, and it was targeted for several different initiatives. One to support Lake Carmi alum treatment, want to support some of the 3-acre funding programs and about 500,000 to seed a financing program for logging industry to finance logging equipment that would be good for water quality. So this was an ask to sort of continue to fund that startup, that $500,000. And in consultation with the programmatic staff, we learned it was maybe too soon to add that in this year, and this may be revisited in future years. So no budget changes recommended there. There were several comments about line 2.5 or just generally about 3-acre, asking for more funding assistance for 3-acre. We did also receive one comment that this line item and stormwater projects in general are less cost effective than agricultural practices and that money should be reduced from this line and moved to line 1.4. So putting aside some of this conflicting and also limited in size public feedback, really DEC is pointing to Act 37 and the charge from the legislature to fund up to $5 million in support of municipal stormwater and 3-acre compliance. So these draft funding levels are shy of the $5 million given the other competing needs, but still provide a substantial investment to sort of start and pilot all these 3-acre needs. So given that, no budget change is proposed. And we also linked in here the recording from the October 9th meeting where DEC staff provided a bit more information about intended uses of the 3-acre funding. And then the last ask was related to both lines 4.4 and 4.5. It's hard to distinguish the response. This was a single question in the questionnaire asking if there was any commentary on both of those lines. And we received one questionnaire response that said, yes, these line items need more funding. This reflects the single recommendation from DEC to change the budget compared to the draft version in October. This is in response to the fact that when this was proposed and asked for, it was at $4 million. And this is in reflection of the $55 million need, but that was reduced in the draft that was proposed to the board to account for some of the match needs that needed to go to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund because of some changes at the federal funding level. So this is a proposal from DEC to reinstate the line 4.5 municipal pollution control grants at $4 million and proposing to meet that not by pulling from any line item, but actually increasing the ask to the legislature of the capital bill. So we highlight in yellow here what this would need to be, both a recommendation from the board and then the $10 million is already allocated for appropriation from a prior capital bill. So it's just the change of $800,000 that needs to be routed through a capital bill adjustment act. Category 5 is a budgeting approach. So the board received some commentary about how to maybe expand the available budget to distribute across the line items. So one commenter recommended paying closer attention to prior year spend down of line items as opposed to using sort of base funding as a way to pick those line items, those line item funding levels. And they also recommended rolling forward past balances and having it reflect in the available budget in future years and showing less conservatism when projecting interest income. Another questionnaire respondent was actually concerned that the board was budgeting more dollars than projected to be received and the impact of the health on the fund. So a couple different comments here. In response, I think DEC really appreciates these suggestions. There's definitely an interest in making as many dollars available as possible to the clean water partners and people doing this important work. Historically, the board has shown conservatism. It's been discussed in prior board meetings, and that has resulted, given recent sort of inflationary market conditions, it's really resulted in unforeseen large balances at the end of fiscal years that the board has been rolling forward and allocating. So in response to the one concerned citizen, that is why the board budgets more than what is projected to come in fiscal year 27, because there's some money from prior years unforeseen is realized and is getting budgeted as well. And then in July, as the board may recall, the DEC staff were tasked with, given sort of the federal funding uncertainty in some places, to be less conservative in trying to draft up a budget. And so what was reflected in the draft in October was a pretty large $2 million projection for earned interest and $0 on the bottom line, $0 cushion, which we've done in the past in case in January the revenue projections face a downgrade. And so with both of those things, we reflected less conservatism. The Department of Finance and Management has also identified maybe some methodological changes the board could consider maybe next year that would impact the operating statement and the revenue projections coming out of there. And DEC really recommends waiting until next year to do that, to see the impacts of some of these other measures taken this year. And then in regard to the recommendation to roll over prior balances or to consider spend down, the agencies are really best positioned to speak to that. They're sort of seeing not just the spend down rates, but also the project pipelines, the capacity, the needs for predictability for different programs. And they are in charge for managing sort of carry forward requests for the dollars in that they're charged with to make sure that they're spent in alignment with board intent. So it's generally assumed that the asks in the draft presented to the board are reflective of all of those considerations already and not needed to be taken up by the board for that reason. Category 5 is commentary that DEC staff may be interpreted instead of budgeting more in the realm of funding program design administration. For example, there was a request to fund infrastructure that has the best clean water returns, a suggestion to use line 1.4, the water quality grants to partners and farmers, more towards hard infrastructure and away from field-based practices, a suggestion to use line 1.52, both for personnel staff to support regulatory implementation, as well as the Vermont Department of Historic Preservation Cultural Resource Review, as well as to use that line to support unifying communications around clean water work, and asked to unlock clean water state revolving loan fund dollars for earlier design stages and a question around the state match. And then a request for a very specific funding program about the timeline for eligible expenses. We try to address all of those answers here for the public who's interested and the board who's interested, but I won't talk through it today. It feels mostly outside of the board's purview for these items. Category 6 were requests to fund certain things that the DEC staff interpreted as maybe outside of the statutory priorities for the board and for the fund. This included several items around pesticide use, so updating the water quality standards to include currently used pesticides, updating pesticide usage data, and developing benchmarks for pesticide reduction. A request to create a specific dedicated funding for trail remediation that would improve water quality, and a request for funding septic systems for and outreach and incentives. And in terms of available funding for these items, there is research funding outside of the clean water budget, but in Vermont that we would recommend folks look to on the pesticide usage work. While DEC does have funding programs that support trail improvements for water quality related to logging roads and skid trails, and we're working on our tracking, accounting, and project type definitions so that we can expand that to include recreational trails so they would be eligible under existing line items. So something to look forward towards the future. And also, while this is outside the Clean Water Fund and budget, DEC has made significant commitments to support failed and inadequate on-site wastewater systems through our Healthy Homes initiative, and the Lake Champlain Basin program using federal funding supports workforce development, outreach, and education on on-site wastewater systems as well. Category 7 relates to geographic distribution of funding. This was one comment. In prior years, we've also only received one comment on this, but we do think it's an important one to highlight and make sure that the board stays cognizant of. So we provide the summary here. That the concern is that the majority of this funding is going towards Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog and leaving out Connecticut and the Hudson River basins. Using the Clean Water Initiative Performance Report, the most recent one that was released this January, About 30% of all funding is going towards Hudson and Connecticut rivers, and 70% goes towards Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog. That 70% includes federal funding that is tagged just for Lake Champlain Basin that must be spent there. So that really inflates those dollars and geographically restricts those dollars. In terms of the clean water budget, there are certain line items that also are only required and available in the Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog basins. So line 1.1, the water quality restoration formula grants are supporting Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog total maximum daily load achievement voluntary phosphorus reductions in those basins. And they're not available. There are not clean water service providers outside of those basins to receive those funds. And line 2.5, which supports 3-acre general permit financial assistance. Again, the 3-acre permit is not applicable outside of these basins right now. So the financial assistance is not available either. There is statewide non-regulatory clean water projects. A portion of that's sort of the enhancement grants that some of our partners are aware of. That's funded at its statutory maximum. It is available statewide, and in the grant agreements, those who manage those funds are required to prioritize outside of Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog. And then there was one comment to reach larger audiences in terms, category 8 is about the public comment process. And there was one comment in this category that recommended reaching out to larger audiences by holding in-person sessions across towns or across regions. And DEC's response is thank you for that commentary. We really are looking for recommendations and ways to best reach our audiences and Vermonters and to engage with them. And happy to take any questions on any of those items, points of clarity. With that, I believe the public comment, I will pass it to Sarah for public comment.
Thank you, Gianna. We had, I think, 2 folks that RSVP'd ahead to give public comment, and I was unable to check while I was screen sharing. Is Katie Stiles on the meeting?
I don't
see.
see.
Okay.
I don't see her.
How about Ernie Engelhardt?
Here in the room.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
Okay, I just here for 2 purposes. The first one is to let folks who may not know it yet that the alum treatment was successful in Lake Conway this fall. It was completed this fall late. The weather conditions were good and the application process went very well. So we're pretty excited about that. We hope things go well in the next few years as testing is done to be sure it's fully taken. Reports secondhand from a couple people who live up at the lake was that within a few days, the lake was much clearer. Matter of fact, someone found a tire out in front of their camp out in the water that they had not seen before. So that's good. I'm personally excited because in the shallow waters where I fish, I've lost dozens of lures trolling over the periods of time that I've been there for 40 some years. And I'm looking forward to going out and retrieving some of them. And who knows what else we might find. Anyway, true to form, the results of Lake Moray quite a while ago, folks said that the water started to clear up right away. So that's really exciting for us. My main purpose was just to thank each one of you on the board for helping support us. We started pestering the legislature in 2017, kept after them, as much as we possibly could and get the process started. And ag has helped us a lot, and certainly Department of Environmental Conservation, Agency of Natural Resources, Julie, been a big help. Anyway, for myself, my family, thank you.
Welcome.
Much appreciated.
I hope in the next couple of years, we'll be in a position to remove the lakes in crisis designation from Lake Carmine.
That would be nice.
It would be really.
We can
nice.
have it if we can have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the only folks that I have that RSVP'd ahead. Is there anybody either in the room I can't see very well or online on Teams that would like to give comment? You can raise your hand or unmute. Okay, not hearing or seeing if you're on. So I don't see any other folks that are interested in giving comment at this time. Should we move on?
Yeah, I think we're good to move on, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks.
And since we have a little bit of space, we're about 10 minutes ahead at this point. Secretary Moore, I hope you don't mind, but I haven't read up on it in a little bit. What's the longevity expectation on the alum treatment?
So there's a bit of it depends.
Right.
And the it depends is a lot of the progress, particularly in the agricultural space, that has been accomplished in Lake Carmine over the Lake Carmine watershed over the last several years is farmers adopting annual practices, changes in using manure injection pretty religiously, conservation tillage, cover crops, etc. And so those practices need to be maintained on a year-over-year basis. That said, we have only two other data points to really point to in Vermont. First is Lake Moray down in Fairleigh, where the initial alum treatment lasted the better part of 40 years, which is well beyond, I think, what reasonable expectations are. The other example we have is Tickle Naked Pond, where there's starting to start to be some breakthrough, I think, in year 8. But it still hasn't sort of returned to kind of pre-treatment conditions. It's still far improved, but it's not, I think, bloom-free would be the way to describe it. So really it is that importance of continuing the good work in the watershed. Lake Carmine, obviously, agriculture is particularly important, but also towns maintaining road practices, campers continuing to do their septic pump outs and other measures. And so there are some structural practices that have been put in place in the Carmine watershed, but a lot of it is sort of the hands-on maintenance pieces, and hopeful the results will be such that people will be really enthused about continuing to make those investments with a dramatic improvement of in-lake water quality.
One of the things that I think is happening in the next few years, they will be doing some sampling of the treatment itself to determine core samples to determine how deep into the bottom of the lake the alum penetrated.
Yeah.
And that'll have an indicator of, if it, and I don't know what the numbers are at all. I could only say if it went down an inch, that's something. That went down 5 inches, it would be a whole lot better. So there's going to be testing, I think, in the next 2 years to determine, and that would have an impact on how long the alum treatment will work.
Correct.
But apparently it was very well successfully done. The weather conditions, the water was relatively quiet, and the treatment went just exactly the way it should be. So we'll know in a few years.
Right.
Have more information.
I think, Ernie's making an important point. Sort of there's the interaction of the alum with the phosphorus that's already in the bottom sediments. And then there's new load that could come
Right.
in from the watershed. And so the testing he's describing will make sure that we've sort of got enough alum there to really bind up what already exists. And then it's the continuation of the good practices people have been implementing over the last 5 to 10 years that will sort of keep that alum, we call it an alum blanket, but keep it from being buried on the lake bottom and therefore
Right.
no longer.
So they'll
able
just
to
get
go
overwhelmed if people's practices revert.
on. Exactly.
Chad?
Ernie, I'm glad to hear we had some action up there. And boy, you had perfect weather. I saw the photo of that barge. It was pretty impressive. I'm curious, what does it cost per application, Ernie? Do you know what the tag ended up being on that?
I don't know.
Emily may know.
Yeah, it was about $2 million for implementation, and a good portion of that came from the clean water budget. And then there was also a clean water state revolving fund loan that was made to the town of Franklin with a good deal, I think fully full principal forgiveness on that with emerging contaminant subsidy that was available. So we were able to leverage some resources through the state revolving fund that could then be forgiven so that the town of Franklin wasn't taking on debt in order to support this project. I think
Thank
it
you.
might have been just over $2 million. I don't have the exact value, but we will certainly be highlighting that project as we work on communications, and it's available in our online project database as well. So maybe I can find the link and get some info out to folks in the chat.
Thanks, Emily. It's just good to be able to respond to people about where the money goes, and it's not cheap, but this is what you need to do.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate also all the hard work that happened, implementation in the watershed to be able to get to this point. And that's a really big piece of the message for other watersheds and lakes that are struggling with blooms, really putting in the hard work that happened in Karmai as a precursor to this treatment was critical. Thank you.
All right, now, if nobody has anything else on the alum topic that we opened up, board discussion on the draft budget. Just looking at another chance to go over, what Gianna covered in the responses to public comment. And again, as a response to that, the DC is recommending, that the one amendment that's being recommended is that increase of $807,600 to the capital bill budget adjustment. So does anyone have any comments or questions at this point in the process? Any board members? Wait another couple of seconds. So, if a question pops to mind, that's fine, but I'll take a little bit of time then to preview. There's one topic that I wanted to be able to formally bring to the board today. Unfortunately, it couldn't get far enough along in development for me to officially present something. But I wanted to make all of the board members aware that I'm working on something within AOA, Agency of Administration, that may, be proposed to the governor, potentially endorsed by the governor. But it would kind of happen, it might happen in the timeline after the Clean Water Board delivers the recommended clean water budget, just because of timing and where we are with some various conversations. I would say it's completely additive. So it would not disrupt or impact any of the line items in the budget that we're recommending, but it is tangentially related to one of the comments about cash flow. The idea behind it is, at a high level, we make commitments through various programs, and it's my belief that those programs have to have autonomy to run and manage themselves without the board revisiting their workflow and kind of trying to figure out, okay, are you moving fast enough or slow enough? Like, we don't know, right? That's up to the experts. But what we can look at is how quickly is cash moving. And at this point, we do have a decent cash balance in the Clean Water Fund. It's all obligated, it's all awarded, but we also could have use of that money in the short term. Now, the limited use that's presenting us right now is it is providing us those interest payments, right? So it is providing us a couple $1 million of interest at this point. So I'm working with some of our financial professionals to see, is there somewhere where we could get more value out of that cash balance than just what the interest payments? And it wouldn't completely undercut the interest payments anyway, because we'd be looking at the rate of spending, we'd be looking at our cash balances, and we'd only be leveraging enough that there's no chance we're going to impact the ability of any program to pay off an award. But using, after careful analysis, an amount of the cash balance to maybe provide some low or no interest loans, primarily to get at some of the legislative objectives that we weren't able to completely address around municipal, the municipal needs, municipal roads. And so it would have been nice if I'd gotten all the boxes checked so that I could have presented that as something for the board to consider. But I just don't think I don't have everything wrapped up enough to present something formal to everyone. But I wanted the board to be aware that I'm working on that, and that it may be something that the Agency of Administration proposes. And if it does get full endorsement by the governor, then I think there would be an opportunity for AOA to bring that back to the board and say, is the board willing to endorse this concept, or would once it reaches a certain stage? Julie, we've talked about this a little bit. Anything you'd add or clarify in what I said?
Just that we do have a precedent or an example of having done something similar with the state revolving fund program and the Whisper, the bridge loans that were made through, was it that Whisper? Or
There was the conservation financing.
Correct.
Land conservation bridge loans.
Yeah, so we similarly in the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and I'll let you clean up whatever I mess up here, Emily. Is we again had sort of a rolling balance in that fund, and we were able to make intentional short-term loans for conservation projects that didn't quite have all of their final funding pieces in place, but had a landowner that felt a great sense of urgency to move forward with the project. We knew ultimately the funding would be secured, but it just was going to require more time than perhaps the landowner had patience in that moment or had need for in that moment. And so we were able to provide low-cost bridge loans. I think the terms were 24 months or less. I'm sort of envisioning something similar here based on your description, Doug. And because there's so much there's enough cash cycling through the system, we are able to do that without impacting project work. And it proved to be sort of a really valuable tool in helping a couple of major land conservation projects move forward. And I think there are other opportunities in this sort of clean water landscape scale space where short-term funding could be really valuable to partners as they are working to secure potentially permanent funding sources, or just don't simply have the cash flow to be able to be reimbursed for some of these more significant, particularly federal grant programs that occur on the back end. So.
Right, and the other parallels that I'm drawing this from, right, we worked with the Municipal Bond Bank after the 23 and 24 floods to provide short and medium term loans to municipalities that were anticipating FEMA reimbursement. So 2 to 3 year loans, basically intending to be paid off once FEMA came through, and which generally takes 2 to 5 years to get payments back from FEMA. And then also the other parallel is the treasurer's 10% for Vermont Authority, right? How they are using the cash balance to lend. And there's a little bit more of an economic development lens on the, well, there actually is in statute. The treasurer's 10% is for economic development. And, you know, he's chosen to invest in housing because housing is fundamental to our economic development at this point in time. But it would be the Cliff Notes version is something like the 10% for Vermont, but specific to the Clean Water Fund for clean water purposes, with probably pretty narrow guardrails, but also to help respond to some of the comments around the costs of 3 acre and the gaps we're seeing there. Also maybe to help respond to the difficulties municipalities have in the upfront costs of standing up a stormwater utility, to help them get through that implementation phase so that they can actually do all the work they need to do to get the stormwater utility up and running. So those are the types of things we're looking at, potentially applying the concept to. And I think we are in, as the comments pointed out, we are in, whenever you have a cash balance in a fund, it is vulnerable to scrutiny, right? And I think we all know that the clean water effort's always been talked about as what, a 40-year? Was it targeted for 40 years? 20, sorry. I'm trying to remember where I got 40 from. Maybe it was from some of the treasurer's initial work, but anyway, decades long work, right? So we know that these are long-term projects, but that still, when you see higher cash balances, that always causes people to ask questions and wonder if we can make things move faster. So this would be a way to deploy to leverage the cash and to get value out of it without actually undercutting or impacting any of those awards. Bob.
Yeah, so appreciate the idea, and I think it actually has the potential to be clever and useful. You know, just a cautionary note, the LIAC program currently is requiring those loans to be secured and having a third party involved in guaranteeing the loan. That won't work in this circumstance, I don't think. So as you're teasing out the proposal, trying to think of how to make it accessible yet being responsible and appropriately protective of the funding.
I don't think the loan had to be secured for the conservation bridge funding.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and double check how the financing mechanisms, how that worked. And in that case, they had a period of time to secure grant funding sources to then pay it off quickly, I think in most cases before payment was required. But it's been a while since I've been in the details of that, but it is a good point.
But yeah, I appreciate that concern too, Bob.
Yeah, it's a legitimate flag. It's one reason I've been working with Michael Gahn, the bond bank, on a couple different concepts. This is just one of the things I've been working with him on. Because we, as a state, we have a healthy position. But of course, I think most of you remember we lost our, AAA a number of years ago. We've been still trying to get it back. We do have to be careful with how many different financial tools we try to deploy, because we can rub the rating agencies the wrong way if we try to get too creative, right? And now in the scheme of the state budget, this is not the type of thing that should rise to the level of causing them alarm, but because it should be constructed pretty well. But when you get to a lot of our communities that are very highly leveraged, and even if they're receiving favorable loan terms, they don't financially have the capacity to take on additional debt. Then you run into a roadblock, right? With some of these concepts. It's like, even if you're offering great terms, some of the communities are just fully leveraged, and we can't get around that in the short term, unfortunately, without just additional money. And this has to be something that would be repaid in a short to medium term. So it can't be additional money to help clear liabilities. All right, so I'll keep the board updated if I do receive authorization to move farther down this road. I will probably send out an email to the full board. It'll be one of those things we'll have to make sure everyone knows it's coming so that we can store it off and save it properly, and ask people not to reply to it so we don't create a public record chain email situation. But I do, if something happens in between meetings, then I'll make sure the board is notified. Laura?
Doug, can you just clarify, was this the unallocated funds or funds that have been allocated but are unspent? That's one question. And then the other is just, there's a rate of return coming right now. And what I heard, if I understood it correctly, is that it would be loaned at an interest rate that would be, I presume, better than the rate of return that is being secured now. Is that the plan? And then have all those other costs of, the government setting all that up, will that all be included in that? And then just a final question, which I think I know the answer to, but I think and assume the Attorney General would be the support for the Clean Water Board. Is that correct? Should there need to be any kind of recollection of funding or anything like that? So just some general admin type questions.
Yeah. So this proposal would use the cash balance in the actual fund, which doesn't show up on the operating statement anywhere. So it wouldn't impact the unallocated funds. It wouldn't impact any of the current year appropriations, expenditures. It wouldn't impact those numbers at all. The financial impact it would have. So I would honestly never propose a program that utilized more than 20% of the cash balance. It'd probably be somewhere between 10 and 20% based on the analysis of the actual cash flow. But I even if it supported it, I probably wouldn't propose anything going above 20%. So the maximum medium-term impact on the Clean Water Fund revenues could be up to 20% reduction in the interest that we're capturing on the operating statement. So it would have a kind of a de minimis impact on the interest, which we currently calculate conservatively anyway. So I think we have a little bit of room built into that interest calculation that we could, with a straight face, say this lending program isn't going to impact, it certainly isn't going to impact current year interest payments, and it would have a minor impact on out year because it would be using between 10 and 20% of the balance. So it wouldn't significantly move the interest. The way I was anticipating, or the way I'm currently proposing it or constructing it, is that this authority to deploy this funding would be, if you remember, was it last year or the year before? I'm losing track of clean water budgets now. There was a year where we proposed that Agency of Administration had like $800,000 that it would be able to deploy to ANR, DEC, or AFM, wherever there was the additional need for federal match requirements. Now, the political winds blew in a different direction and the opposite happened, right? And that money wasn't used because the need didn't materialize. But it would be a similar thing where the Agency of Administration would have authority to basically fund a program to work with the bond bank, primarily because bond bank partners with ANR on the revolving loan fund. And there are states' best experts on lending practices, essentially. So the Agency of Administration, we do get legal support from the Attorney General's office, but to the same extent that any lawsuit brought forward by the state is prosecuted by the Attorney General, even if it's at ANR or AG or anywhere else. That answer all the questions, Laura?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
So again, I threw a lot out into the air rapidly. If this does get more traction, if it does get support, then I won't just be sharing a, hey, we'll be proposing something. There'll be like a write-up, 2-page, like a white paper type thing, or I'm not sure what the appropriate term, an issue brief or something like that. I don't know. We're not supposed to use that term anymore.
White paper is good.
Yeah. But I would share materials with the board on what the agency intends to propose. Would have more details in it. All right, any further discussion on clean water budget? All right, if there's no discussion, then I would like to entertain a motion. The draft motions on the agenda to approve the adoption of state fiscal year 2027 clean water budget recommendation as proposed in supporting material number 4.
This, and Chair Farnham, this budget and supporting material 4 reflects DEC's recommended change, so it does reflect the 800.
I will move that.
Thank you, Secretary Moore. Do I have a second? Bob, thank you.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye or raise your hand in Teams.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All abstaining. I think we got 100% the first time anyway.
I apologize, Doug. I am double booked starting now, and so have to.
All right,
step
well,
out for
good.
Another meeting, but we've got through the meat of.
We got through it.
Yes.
The motion passes. So we'll move that version forward. And as Gianna said, supporting material number 4, right? It has that one recommendation from DEC for the related to the capital bill and the municipal pollution control grants. So let's move into wrap up and next steps. So I'll go to Sarah on the Clean Water Initiative 2025 performance report.
Yeah, I think it's just a quick update that we have the draft performance report that'll be presented to the legislature in the beginning of the new year. And I can,
All right.
Sorry, Doug, Chair, did you want me to also, yeah, we also are anticipating the February Clean Water Board meeting in the new year as well.
Right. That'll be our next meeting. I don't remember the date.
We haven't said it
offhand.
yet.
We haven't said it yet? Okay. All right. So yes, our next meeting's in February. We'll be setting the date. And that'll give us an opportunity to review the governor's recommended budget. And like I said, I don't normally propose things within AOA that are clean water related, but it's just a timing thing. So I'll make sure that the board is apprised at the earliest opportunity if the governor's amenable to the cash balance concept. And it would be in advance of that February meeting, obviously. But I think most of you know we're not always free to talk about the decisions until it's firmly greenlit. All right. So at this point, I'll entertain, unless there are any questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just a quick comment. If we're going to, in February, there's a good chance I could be in Australia. So if we are putting out some sort of poll for the timing, I prefer the afternoon. Right now, or late afternoon. Right now it's 6 a.m. in Sydney. Just something to think about for February.
Okay,
Thank you.
good note.
And I can move to adjourn with that as well.
All right. Have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Tate. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. This meeting of the Clean Water Board is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.